demo, and you get an instant demo site if you fill out a form on that page, and that happens quite a few times a month, and we're fortunate enough that the project granted us access to manage that site. And we have about 30 employees that are involved in the management of that whole setup. That's cloud access.
John Neubauer, I'm a Joomla developer. We build Joomla sites for all types of organizations, large organizations, small organizations, government, everything in between. My role in most of them is the quote-unquote project manager, which is usually everything that nobody else wants to do, and making sure the project gets done on time and within budget. And that includes, first of all, making sure we build our sites in something that can be maintained secure, and then making sure that that site never compromises those standards that we've set at the beginning. Did I do?
So I'm Paul Orwig. I'm a one-person freelancer. I do Joomla work, PHP work, integrations with Google Earth, a variety of things. As the president of Open Source Matters, I'm not a security expert. I'm happy to join this group and listen and take questions and take feedback and bring things back. I think I'm here to really represent that the leadership is really interested in any security-oriented questions and improvements.
So my name is David Gurley. I run a web development company in North Carolina. Apart from doing custom development for clients, we also specialize in writing applications on the Joomla platform, as well as writing extensions for the Joomla format. So we deal with CRM mainly, as well as project management tools, things like that. So we deal with both clients that are handling security issues on their site, as well as offering support to people that are purchasing extensions and how to get those installed and secured as well.
Where do you think?
North Carolina.
What about?
In the Burlington area, right between Raleigh and Greensboro.
So we're going to start the session off with identifying the extremes of security. In this world that we live in, there's some crazy people out there like to hack sites, and you guys probably have been witness to, maybe if you've been living in Joomla world a little while, maybe an extension got hacked, or maybe your FTP details were stolen and then someone injected some code inside of you. And so all those things happen to, at some point, somewhere around you if you've been in Joomla world. And so there's this thing that's called I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this, PCI DSS, and then there's HIPAA, and there's standards for security. And really, in PCI and DSS, they don't mention Joomla. There's no mention really to content management systems, and they leave pretty cryptic of as far as like how far you can take security. So what we're going to talk about is, and you guys can ask questions, this is the extreme of what you can do with a Joomla site in security, and this is what you would find probably in a type 1 through type 4 setup of a PCI DSS environment. And if you were actually a hospital and you wanted to run Joomla in a HIPAA compliant environment, this is what you would have to do. So if you could imagine this, you are an end user sitting out there in the world, and you're coming into, this whole thing is a Joomla site. And what you need to happen here is you got two internet connections, and these internet connections come into a piece of equipment called a router. And the router is BGP connected, means you need two connections. You need to have more than one connection coming into the system. And right when you hit the router, where actually terminates the bigger internet connections, you have what's called a perimeter firewall. And a perimeter firewall is like a big gate going around the outside edge of your Joomla site, and it blocks everything except ports. Right? So what you're saying is, in this environment, you're saying, well, I'm going to let an internet connection through, but I'm only going to let certain ports through. For the Joomla environment, you would let through port 80 for just HTTP, and then 443 for HTTPS. In a really secure environment, you would eliminate port 80. A lot of times, if you visit a banking site, you're going to see this environment. You're going to see that you have, it forwards you instantly to an HTTPS connection. You have no option to go regular HTTP. And so what we call that a perimeter firewall. In that environment, if you wanted to actually break into the Joomla site and get it, You're going to be going through, I have a picture of Barracuda there, because maybe you guys understand Barracuda, but there's lots of application firewalls. It doesn't particularly have to be Barracuda. There's a selection of companies out there that offer a layer of protection where if once you actually request a Joomla site from a connection, if you're coming through port 443, which is HTTPS, and you're trying to get the index.php file, you're going to fall through typically this thing here, and this thing's really fancy. It actually is a type of environment where it takes the SSL certificates installed inside of this Barracuda, and it decrypts the connection as it comes in, inspects the packet and looks at it and says, are you doing an SQL injection? Are you trying to pull out like a series of credit card numbers? Like, is there certain strings that we're not supposed to do? And in this Barracuda firewall product, or any product, you can define whether or not you have certain strings of content that you never want to escape, or you never want to exchange more than one time. For example, let's say that someone wanted to hack your Joomla site and they wanted to steal maybe, social security numbers. Let's say you happen to be one of the companies that are storing social security numbers in your Joomla site. Well, you've got to have a user come into the site and maybe pull up the Joomla application and see one social security number, but a hacker who's going to come in is going to come into the database and they're going to want to grab all the social security numbers at once. So the Barracuda and other application firewalls are smart enough to detect that sheme and say, uh-oh, buddy, you're not allowed to do that, so it's going to stop the connection. So that's kind of what an application firewall does. It's smart. It inspects packets and is pretty. I mean, it's pretty intense. It's done a lot of work. I mean, you have a big 300-person company monitoring and keeping track of these appliances. These appliances do typically reach out to third-party services. You probably heard of them before. The OWASP service is one of them. Maybe you've heard of an open source world where they track trends of viruses or trends of some kind of hacking attempt happening, and they'll feed this appliance, and the appliance will detect that sheme and try to stop it. Sometimes these things can become quite vicious. You want an application firewall to let you through, but it won't let you through in an environment where you're actually being really trying to use the environment how you're supposed to use the environment. So following through the network in a secure environment, you have Apache server here and the MySQL server here. You notice that we separated the application from the actual database. You're supposed to, in a real secure environment, you're supposed to separate MySQL from the Apache server and physically network them together. Whether you do it through virtualization, which is like a pretend wire between them, where you have two virtual machines in this kind of setup, we have layered like that, or you physically have a cable connected in between, like a cross-connect cable or a switch between the two physical machines. So it's like having one server here, Apache here, and MySQL back here, and then network together especially so they communicate with each other. In an environment where you really didn't want the hacker to get something, you encrypt the file system on both ends, and you encrypt what's called the in-flight data between the Apache server and the MySQL server. The reason you encrypt the file system is you get to an environment where the type of file system that if you encrypt it, like let's take an example, like it's called 256 AES encryption is something that HIPAA would allow, and consider if someone went in and stole this whole two-server setup and hauled it home and wanted to keep it, there's no way they could hack it because it's encrypted with AES 256 encryption, and the actual encryption method requires a key. And the key is not stored on those servers. It's actually stored either in your head, somewhere in a disaster recovery plan, somewhere else in the world, but it's not on these servers. So if they stole it, they would have to, there's no possible way. No one's ever broken AES 256. It's not even happened. So that's why HIPAA and PCI consider that kind of encryption method pretty important. And so don't let the key out, of course. And then on the back end here, what we do is we would, this perimeter firewall is still kind of wrapping around this, even though you don't see it kind of wraps around this whole thing here. On the back end, in a secure environment, you would separate the physical backup system on a private network. So where these servers actually serve internet out the front end, out the back end is physically another cable that comes out the back end of the server where you would also encrypt that data, meaning that you cannot store social security numbers and credit card numbers in this environment and expect that you're going to back it up in clear text on a backup server, because again, you're vulnerable because someone's going to steal those credit card numbers of social security accounts. So you do is you pick a backup system that's going to grab the data, encrypt it from the server in flight to the backup system, and then have a separate key, another AES 256 encryption method. And well, it gets kind of intense to do all this. Imagine if you want to FTP into an environment like this. This is a banking environment or an insurance environment. We have what's called two-factor authentication. You've probably heard of that. Google recently activated it on Google Apps. The Google Apps system, you know, you call it and it gives you a key, or you text message you something and it lets you in. So supposedly, you know, that's like a third mechanism that allows you in. Well, you can tie in into not only to the physical infrastructure, like how you FTP in, or you wouldn't actually FTP in this part, you would use what's called SFTP into the environment, and or log into the Joomla system. You would actually protect Joomla with a plugin. You'd plug in into the administration section something that would actually protect the application layer, to do two-factor authentication to the application. And before you even get two-factor authentication into the system, you would use what's called a VPN tunnel into the network. So meaning that I would only allow you to even do this two-factor authentication is if I knew where you were at and what user you were. For example, I would tie you to a physical IP address, so, or a physical location or physical subnet. You know, kind of like, you know, data centers here in this data center, and you work in, you know, Microsoft offices, and you're only allowed to access it from Microsoft offices in order to get in here. So we try to do in security, we try to isolate as much as possible. So that's kind of the story behind how you would build a Joomla site that would work in a banking environment. This is probably the real extremity of anyone would want to build security, and I go ahead and file some questions because it's a lot to swallow. Some people think that it's kind of secure to, like, you know, change maybe just the database tables in or the prefixes in Joomla, or possibly to you know, install a firewall like RS firewall into the system. Some of those things work, but it doesn't quite compare and contrast to an environment like this if you really want a secure environment.
What's the minimum security you would need for, let's say, a membership site where people have to, you know, they're paying for membership? What's the minimum security requirements are? I mean, do you get to list change the membership site? No?
So, if you wanna be not liable for the environment that you're, like, for example, if you're storing your credit card in the Joomla site, and that credit card ends up getting stolen, and then the hacker gets it, and then you get reported to the bureaus, then you're liable for the credit card companies to process the paperwork to handle that.
When you go into a third-party site?
So,
A third-party,
yeah.
like a credit card?
yeah, so using APIs, we typically try to exchange that data with like Authorize.net. So Authorize.net stores the credit card information in this environment. This is what Authorize.net has. This is what they have this on the back end. It's probably not a Joomla site to say, but it's a database and it's sitting on the back end. So typically what you try to do is, if you can do it, is rather than storing the credit cards physically in your own database, you pass the credentials to a third-party payment processor, which is PCI secure. Yeah.
The argument is, I know you from the beginning, if you are to store credit card information, you have that environment very close to that.
If you're going to store credit card information, you're supposed to have this environment. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Go ahead.
What is the, just if you're running a regular brochure Joomla site and there's nothing particularly, just content, articles, whatever, what is the minimum to protect your site?
You guys want to talk? I can say a lot, but good.
I think that's kind of, the minimum to protect your site is kind of, to some extent, it's relative to kind of what, theoretically, the fact that you have a password on your administrator is security. But, I mean, to protect your site, there's a lot of just common sense stuff that you can do. You don't have to be a programmer. You don't have to have thousands and thousands of dollars to build something like this, like Gary's done here, for you know, a really intense system like this.
Well, I mean, there is a set of, I think, just common sense stuff which you can do that extends into the site and even out of the site. Even things as, starting with your computer. Many people don't think about that, but if your computer is safe and somebody steals your SMT address, they don't really need to hack anything, they just have it, You just gave it to them.
Which is
Thank
really
you.
popular, really
Right.
popular.
Yes, FTP hacks are probably one of the, when we deal with a lot of security people come to us saying our site is hacked, and that's probably one of the most popular, the most common.
And how do they get them? How do they get them for because I think people understand where that.
Right, well, I mean, that could come with anything, and browser interaction.
So malware.
Right, you've heard of this.
I use some for the first thing that's going to do is stores all your passwords that you have in the same location every time. So malware, you'll get on the computer and you think that you've got a computer virus, go get cleaned off, you're good to go. Well, the first thing that virus might do is go look at those popular locations for all your passwords and it just report back. It's just like that. You clean up the virus, you think you're all set, but you have to go
And nowadays, legal access, according to the server, according to your server, legal access, they don't need to hack.
What do we do with our 10,000 passwords that we share with our employees?
I mean, first it would be something that stores your password into a plain text.
Well, my main question on that is, what I do for my passwords on my computer is I put two places, and then I make an encrypted file that I have to load, but I don't know how to steal the password.
One thing that we use a lot, and it's probably not a perfect solution, but I think it's kind of like the two-factor authentication, and he even mentioned it with SFTP here, is use SFTP, which requires an additional key that's, that is an encrypted key to access, to actually establish an FTP connection. So it's just not a simple string of password and something like that. So that's something that it's meant for other purposes as well to put the connection there, but that helps, I think, with
So is that a reference to the first time I'm just using sharing as a PlayStation. The first time I make a secure FTP connection to it, it comes up and says, you can't verify
You want to have this fingerprint, yes, no.
Yeah.
And I
So that
say,
would be
yes,
SFTP.
are you saying I can specifically register a certificate with them and then no one else would get that or something? I mean, I don't understand.
On a shared hosting environment, I'm not so sure. I think it might depend on the host. When you get into a dedicated, yes, you can definitely block access except from certain IP ranges or certain blocks, quite easily.
And that would solve somebody getting, of course, they still have access to your computer if you have anything about it.
So there's nothing I can do. Other than using a secure FTP, that doesn't stop. What I'm worried about is somebody hacking my computer and harvesting all my stored passwords. I mean, I could not store them and type them in. But
Well,
session-
and that's a big problem because to a certain extent, once somebody gets in your computer, where else are you going to store passwords on a piece of paper? But then when somebody gets that piece of paper, and so that is a vulnerable point. You can use, to a certain extent, you can use applications that manage encrypted passwords and require another password on top of that, to do that. But your machine is an important part. You having physical control and virtual control of your machine is an important part, and that's why we say, even in this, it seems like everybody has antivirus these days. but
A lot of
something is important.
corporations will force you to use a virtual machine, like a remote desktop connection, because the extreme is that someone's got keyword logging on your computer, right? They're physically logging keystrokes, so there's nothing you can do about logging keystrokes, right? If someone's logging keystrokes, you're out of luck. But if you're connecting to a environment where the keys are set, where you're not typing anything, but you put the keys on a virtual machine in the cloud, for example, okay? And I'm using cloud as an arbitrary term because really it would be a remote machine where you're logging into a VPN tunnel and the key's sitting on the machine that you have access to. So for example, remote desktop, and then you're just using the key that's there, you're not typing anything, and that machine's isolated, you of course would never install anything in that virtual machine. It would be pure install of Windows and that kind of environment, and that's it. And so that's all you can do. I try to, my advice as far as passwords go, I store them in a spreadsheet, and I use my own encryption method in my mind. So for example, the letter R is really W to me. So as long as I know all my passwords are right in my face, but I know it sounds strange, but who's going to crack my brain? Because so you have and I do more than one, not just one. So if I have my passwords like doghouse 34, and I'm converting D into 9 and 4 into W, then I just do the conversion in my brain when I type my password. That way I can at least keep memory of what all my passwords are. That's one of my methods. I don't know.
But that loop right there of how you store your passwords and then you typing in your passwords and stuff like that. I mean, you can go to do the VPN connection and stuff, but that is something that you can't really foolproof that or 100% secure that because it involves humans and humans make errors.
I think we definitely need to see more two-factor authentication. I mean, that was a logical thing. I have my PayPal account, I have a little card in my wallet, and I can't purchase anything with my PayPal without, pushing the button to get a random digit time code out of my car. And I'd love to see that on every one of my FTP sites and stuff like that.
Does a program like Little Snitch help at all? Reading connections, people reading things out of your machine in and out?
I mean, that could definitely, with your server, your FTP client, whatever, or for that matter, anything you're really doing, if you have a keylogger, that's the easiest way. But if it sends stuff in plain text over your connection, of course.
All it does, I have it installed in my laptop, and all it does is just alert me that some communication is going out, and I can either block it or not.
Yeah.
So if it's an unknown source, I deny the connection, but I'm not sure how.
Those desktop tools that are meant to help protect you, and they're credible tools, whether it's a virus protection or some anti-block something or something. I mean, they're going to be a resource for people that really maybe don't know what they're clicking on many times. So,
but by that time, in many instances, it's already too late. They don't really, if they've gotten into your computer already to establish that connection back, that's the last step they're doing. They've already actually gone through a lot of actions to get in, harvest your data. That's kind of just the very last step. So that could help, but ideally you'd have something before that, like an antivirus or firewall or something like that, to stop them from getting in the first place.
Fresh install Windows, and then install your software, and then kind of plan ahead so you're secure all the time.
What are your guys' opinions on firewalls? I mean, I've had a firewall since firewalls came out, and I don't know, maybe I've just been lucky. I've never had a virus, never had anything. I mean, I've had antivirus programs, installed since they first started coming out. And I think the reason why I've never had any hacks to my computers is because I had a firewall, not so much the antivirus program. So, what do you guys think about it? Just like Zone Alarm, like I swear by Zone Alarm. I mean, it's
right, and somebody else is going to swear by.
Yeah.
Some of those, remember, there's two types of firewalls. Or it could be more than that, but the basic ones are the application firewall and blocking IP addresses, right? Or ports. So
well, the Zone
Alarm does a little both.
It does both.
It does both. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, they're good. You use them. I mean, this is what this is for. That's like Zone Alarm. I mean, it's an application firewall. It sits between. This is the application, and this is the public internet, and it sits in between, and it watches packets, and it watches. No, this one here doesn't watch ports because we have actually what's called a perimeter firewall that blocks all like UDP and TCP ports that would be otherwise intruding where they shouldn't be or accessing something they shouldn't. So, but this is from the application side. You're talking on the computer side.
Right,
so on your computer side, all good stuff if you can install it and it's credible stuff.
Yeah, because when people say that they get hacked, I'm like, how could you get hacked? I mean,
so, but that's an important thing, and it's good that you've done that, and you can see that it's obviously helped you over the last however long. But a lot of people, they get hacked and they come to us and they say, but they automatically assume it's a problem with their website, or somebody hacked Joomla or something like that. And it could be, if you're on an old version of Joomla, it might be. But I'd say odds are it's probably not the website. I'd say at least 50% or more of the people that we get, it's more a problem of somehow FTP or something was compromised, or somebody got in their computer and just got their website credentials, of whatever level, Joomla level or FTP level or something like that. We've had even, people that have had their websites hacked and they got their whole hosting account compromised, so people can go in there and log, a hacker can go in there and lock them out of their own hosting account.
Well, recently, a friend of mine who has a company in West Palm Beach, one of his clients who had a really old version of, I didn't work on the site, but he asked me to help to try to find out what's going on. And what I found was that he had a really old version of Joomla, and I guess he had just installed this Blogger module or plugin, and it got hacked. And the guy got in and just dumped a whole bunch of, he changes all the PHP files, the .htt access file, and just.
And that's probably the most important thing to do, is to keep your site up to date.
Yeah, you have to stay on top of not only just the core Joomla, but your extensions as well. And Joomla provides excellent resources for keeping track of the vulnerabilities list, so you can go and check and you can be notified if an extension is vulnerable through, the file permissions or the folder permissions that they have, or missing files or something like that, or SQL injections. And I think that's it's key to think that, sometimes it might not even be your site, but if you're on a shared hosting plan with a lot of other sites, and you can go and look up your IP address if you are, and you can see how many thousands of other sites are on your same shared host. If one of those sites gets hacked, and a common one is like, script kiddies, where they just have a little PHP function that they're going to run against a site that they know might be running an outdated version, of Joomla or even some other CMS. What that script often will do is going to go and grab anything else on that same IP address. And so your site might not have been the target, but because you might have something on that site that doesn't have the correct folder permissions, you could be lose access as a result of somebody else's having an outdated version.
But keeping the site today, we just got a client this last Wednesday. It's kind of ironic that we're talking about this. This last Wednesday, got a client. They have 22 Joomla 1.5.7 sites. All of them on the same host. All of them.
Because they'll get in on one, and then the little script just runs and goes over and over and tries to find every other site.
So now we have to clean them all up.
Yep.
Is there any way that Joomla could, any way for you guys, when someone does, when they go into, what is it called? They changed the name recently. When you're installing Joomla for the first, on the server.
What's it called? The prefix.
The program that they used to be called.
You talking about in the cPanel?
Yeah, in the cPanel. What's it called?
Like Fantastic?
Yeah, it's called something else now. It used to be Fantastic.
Right.
But when you install Joomla, to put the high security level for certain folders or certain files,
that's
right
really
away.
Dependent on your host and what your host
Right
allows. It's not really something that.
That's not something that
you
Joomla can do.
But Joomla, by default, Joomla kind of uses the standard or recommended file permissions for both files and directories throughout the Joomla installation.
Right.
Because the reason I say that was because in the images folder, if you have, you can click on right click on an image and see the path and actually go to the path within Joomla.
You shouldn't.
And if these are images that you don't want people to be able to get to, they can get to them.
But images are the only thing you can do that to. You can't do that to other component files or any extension files, PHP files, or anything like that.
And
images are the only thing you can do.
And you can't do folder browsing.
Right.
You can see that one image, but you can't automatically see all the images in that folder because by default everything has a blank index.html. That's a requirement for anything that goes into
One
Joomla.
thing that may help you is Akiba Admin Tools. I believe the free version has a file and folders permission reset function. I know the pro version does, where you can go in and say, check all my permissions, set them to what they should be,
Right.
and not only will that secure things, but if you accidentally goof and, like, every 1 or 2 times I've gone through shit and opened something up I shouldn't have,
Right.
the admin tools will go back and reset it back for you. So that's one way, if you just want to say, I'm going to play it safe, set them all flat to what they should be. The admin tools makes the way to do that.
I'll check that out.
A question,
Yes.
actually.
Yes, I saw you're gonna do that.
I know there's a couple things in the Joomla extension directory, Security Check Pro, things like that, that will go through your list of extensions and tell you what's vulnerable. I haven't had a chance to explore any of them, and to a certain extent, I don't trust them because they sound like they're trying to get you to buy money for something you should be able to do. How trustworthy are those?
I think probably the most reliable source in the Joomla community is the vulnerable extensions list. It's on the Joomla docs site. It's a page on there. It's where only certain people can edit it. If you just Google the Joomla vulnerable extensions list, it'll probably come up on top there. It's a list that the Joomla project maintains of extensions that we know are vulnerable. It contains a status on them of why they're vulnerable and what the status of them as far as coordinating that with the developer and making sure it's fixed. And you can see all the past ones too. So you know kind of the history of an extension. Does it have a history of becoming vulnerable and being fixed and stuff like that? So if you just Google that, that's probably the most, and there's a feed that you can get of updates to that, and that's one thing that everybody should be subscribed to. You may not know how to fix the vulnerability or why it's vulnerable, but if you get an email of that says it's vulnerable and you have that extension, it needs uninstalled.
Thank you.
Next, I think we have one right here. Are you looking?
Yeah, I was going to say a little bit more about admin tools. I had one site hacked. I strongly feel it was probably my client's computer got hacked. I mean, I was complaining. I said, your computers are so slow. I wouldn't know if they had a virus on them or not. You got to get new computers. I got to be able to. So it's probably just she lost the password. But when I added admin tools, and some of the things you can do is, first of all, you don't even see the admin screen unless you put a query string after administrator on the back, so that's nice. So if somebody has your password, if they pick up from a list, unless they also pick up this address, they won't even see the screen on the back to log in. So that's interesting. And the other thing is if they successfully log in, you can have it send you an email every time someone logs in. So if you
There's
get
a couple tools like that. Admin Tools is a very popular one, and it combines a lot of these functions that can help you. There's a couple other ones that we use, JSecure a lot. Yeah, yes it is. And that does some of the same functions as far as obscuring the administrator login and stuff like that, and kind of logging, keeping track of stuff like that. Those I think are very helpful for that.
There's RS Firewall, if you guys know.
Yeah, so even if you have that second level authentication method, this kind of almost adds a third to it, because not only do you have to have the username and password, but then you have to have the query to access it, and then you have to have that second authentication from the system to be able to access it. So, you're getting pretty good there as far as protecting the administrator section.
And it'll let you also add like IP addresses and things like that.
Blacklisting and
that's
whitelisting.
good. Which leaves your computer being hacked and FTP passwords harvested. To me, that's the number one. That's the one I worry about the most.
Yeah. I think, that combination right there, as far as protecting the password itself and then protecting the access to the administrator section of the site, which is where, if somebody gets in there, they can do just about anything. You put those three things together, protecting the password itself, and then the administrator interface, and then the second level of authentication, if you can do that. Putting those three together is pretty strong to protect that aspect of your site. That doesn't protect you against, SQL injections or stuff like that can be done if you haven't prepared for that. But as far as that aspect, that's a pretty strong plan.
It leaves me where the next step I would logically take, except I've been too lazy to do it, is that instead of when I have to research things on the internet using the same computer that's my development computer, I should be like in a virtual machine running a browser or answering my mail, so that I don't get the actual machine hacked. Something else, but it's like a lot of work. I'm not that disciplined. But
What is the number one way to stop an SQL injection if they were to try to curb it? Does anyone can guess? What would you do with a Joomla site?
Don't put it on the net.
Once it's already happening.
What does someone have to do when they do an SQL injection? What do they have to know? Anyone know? They have to know how to get in, right? Right? So they know how to get into port 80, and they know how to get in through port 443, so they know how to get to the application, they know the URL. Probably just changing the prefixes for a lot of you is going to help you there. So if you haven't looking at all your Joomla sites, if it says Joss underscore,
And luckily, in the new versions of Joomla 2.5, it kind of randomly chooses a prefix for you, and it's like and so that's kind of mitigated a little
don't
bit.
leave them all the same on the shared hosting service. If you leave them all the same, then you run the risk of if you're always typing the same prefix, that someone who is going to run a series of SQL injections against the shared hosting instance is going to hit you more than once. So.
Yeah, right there.
That's got
Yeah, one thing to make sure, especially if you're in a VPS environment and you get default MySQL set up, make sure you secure MySQL in many ways. One of the things is there's a test account set up there. A few things set up by default MySQL, those are helpful things because guess what? You can secure your Joomla website rock solid, but they get your SQL, they get to everything else they want to get into.
Should you have passwords on your database?
You always have to have a password on the database.
No, but under the PHP My Admin, you should have an HT access in front of it.
You can go pretty extreme with all that stuff. I mean, but ultimately, honestly, if you guys are in a shared hosting environment, then there's your problem already.
Wait, why don't you ask that question? How many of us have sites on shared hosting? Okay?
that'd be a very
Raise your
interesting-
hand.
Production
Most of
sites,
us.
not
Most of us do.
Why do you have
Yeah.
an account on the shared host?
Cheaper.
Because your clients
Expense.
have them already set up, and you have to work on
Okay.
the client side.
Oh, it's cheaper.
Yeah, we have to start
Yeah.
moving their mail and everything. We don't have to.
But how?
Support.
Well, if you have a dedicated
Cheaper
server.
monetarily or cheaper in support and service?
Well, it all depends, but it's just, I mean, I host with SiteGround, and I basically only have one client that uses a dedicated server because he sells membership, and, does credit card transactions, and he's got a lot of traffic. So, but if you're not getting a lot of traffic, your website is not like getting a lot of traffic, and don't need, SSL, you don't need a lot of security, then I guess hosting is like your next best option, right? I mean, shared hosting.
Well, I think one of the
which-
things, kind of the compromises in between there is, if you don't have to have your own dedicated hardware server, not necessarily, even a virtual server is fine, but shared, there's a difference between shared, like you have your own virtual machine or an actual physical machine, and you put all your sites on it,
Right.
and shared as in I have shared hosting with 5,000 people that I have no clue what they are, what they're doing, what they're running, and how they're interacting with the rest of the internet. There's a difference between that. So shared as far as all of my sites are on the same, they share the same server, is less of a problem because I know exactly what's there. I control how up to date or secure they are, as opposed to shared where I'm paying $1.99 a month and I'm with all these people that I have no clue what they're
I
doing.
think most people are on the ladder, which is the last one, right?
Yeah.
Most people are on
Yeah.
that one, where they're just sharing
You
with
can
anybody
you can
else.
watch your shared hosting companies. You can watch them some. You can discover information about how they're processing PHP, right? Or you can ask them about how they handle their tenancy. Which when you have tenancy, you have little sock. You put them in little slots. Everyone gets a slot on the server, and if you notice your shared host is on Cent 4.0, and you're like, okay, I'm secure. Well, PHP's up to date. Well, why you can watch all the things that are in your environments, at least to be careful to make sure that they have up-to-date operating system, up-to-date PHP, up-to-date MySQL, and how they process PHP, and there's a few other things that you would look for in a shared hosting environment.
This you can do inside. I know you can see some of that information in the back end, but is this only in the back end where you can find this information, or is there like a website
Well, there's
or
some.
a link?
If you look at, you can just if you get SSH access, you can discover all that from SSH, and there's some PHP scripts that print the information out there a little bit. So, what's that?
Will PHP info do that or provide that information?
Well, PHP info will provide the PHP info, but not about the tenant space. But Joomla itself has a little bit of information about how it processes PHP. Like, for example, CloudAccess.net uses what's called mod FCGID. And mod FCGID is a way that we process our PHP processes. And some of you are using like mod PHP, and you guys are always, usually the people who are using mod PHP are the ones, it's the fastest form of processing PHP, but it's the most insecure in a shared environment because you're running on root privileges and the PHP processes, and you're not actually converting the tenancy into the actual user, which is how you're supposed to do it under a multi-tenancy environment, is to actually be running your PHP processes as the tenant user, not as the root user, because you run the risk of someone else's processes invading your area. And typically, mod PHP is the one where you guys are dealing with permissions issues. If you guys are like changing stuff to 777 to try to get something to work, please run away from the hosting company, because there's never a reason. And these days, in hosting environments, if you ever have to touch permissions, you're probably in trouble. You need to run. Okay.
They're in the very back. You.
If I have a managed, hosted, cloud-based server with Rackspace, is that considered a shared environment because it's on the cloud? I mean, when I SSH into the server, I'm the only one in there. Is that?
Are you using Rackspace? Are you using Rackspace sites, or are you using Rackspace virtual machines?
I have a physical. I have sites, and I also have a virtual cloud server.
Okay, so you bought a virtual. It's the VM, right?
Right.
The
Yes.
virtual machine
It's the
product.
cloud
Like
server.
you have it's called their cloud sites.
Yeah, I have cloud sites, cloud server.
Cloud server.
And
Okay,
then
cloud
there's-
server is really a virtual machine. That's what they. So Rackspace has what's called sites, which actually is a cluster, and it's shared hosting is what it is. They just cluster it, so it's supposed to scale better. And then they have a virtual machine offering, which is actually a VM in the cloud. And what you're doing when you have a VM in the cloud, what you have is what's called a hypervisor underneath. And the hypervisor allows little machines to sit on top. Little machine, little machine, little machine, little machine. So you have one big server with a hypervisor, little machine, little machine, little machine, little machine, little machine. And you share tenancy through the hypervisor. Okay, it's like shared hosting, but it's full isolation. Well, probably the only way you could get hacked is if someone broke into the back end of Rackspace network and actually broke into the hypervisor. And highly unlikely, but you are in a multi-tenant environment when you're doing a virtual machine, both in Amazon, Rackspace, or anybody's virtual machine.
Well, there's a lot more benefits to having your setup there with a virtual machine than
It
just
is.
the typical shared
Yes.
multi-tenant hosting where you're just having a
Because
little
it's
bit
a
of
jail-
space
it's a
right
jail
next to
environment.
somebody else and right next to somebody else.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's that,
One of the other things that they also be careful is your site might have been hacked and you'll never notice. Your pages were left untouched. That's where they put a lot of phishing pages and other things onto your site. So you're trying to
Yeah.
see what files you have up there, make sure there's nothing suspicious. I've had
Constantly
clients do that
monitoring, run
before.
file scans and stuff like that. We had a client out a month and a half ago that they had been hacked for like 3 years. And the only thing they did is they put little tiny ads in the site that you did not hardly see, but they probably made millions of dollars off of that site over the course of years because it's a fairly big university site. And they got hacked and they didn't even know it. And then all of a sudden, all their search, they realized it because finally these guys changed something and all their search engine listings were like going to, Viagra and all these crazy places like that. And they're like, wait a minute, we're a university, we can't do that.
That's typically how DDoSes are completed, right?
Yeah.
A hacker goes around and he hacks a server, doesn't tell you, hacks a server, doesn't tell you, hacks a server, doesn't tell you. He has 500 ready. When he's ready, he's got an army behind him. And
So-
all he does is type a command, and then he sends his army out and beats the crap out of somebody.
So, even things like just doing regular file scans of, watching what changes in your site and actually scanning the files themselves and seeing what's in them, with these scanning tools that can, try to detect, malware or whatever in your site. Even if you don't think you've been hacked, doing that on a regular basis is important.
Are these
And
cPanel?
how many-
Are these file scanners in the cPanel?
I don't know, it's been a long time since
Yeah.
I've used cPanel.
No, they're not in cPanel. If you want to run an MD5 patch on your files, you can. I think Kiva Tools does that, right? Or the admin tools. There's a few extensions directory on there. If you're really concerned, swipe the root files, except the /templates directory in your configuration.php with a core install of Joomla, and you can have a fresh install ready to go, and then watch them from there. Make sure that shut off FTP access.
And what do you have over here?
no, I was
Oh, okay.
asking about the server that I'm using, the grid server, Media Temple, and whether that is also a shared environment.
That's just like Rackspace Sites. The grid product from Media Temple is exactly like Rackspace Sites. It's a cluster. They have Apache server sitting out front, and then they have a load balancer way out front, and then but you share tenancy back. It's just like it's like one big shared hosting server, but it's really big because they load balance it, and it's scary stuff. Media Temple's been hacked a couple times. Yeah.
One other thing, are you guys familiar with the web developer toolbar with like Firefox that you can use? That one, we actually had a site a little bit ago that was one of our clients had been blacklisted by Google. You get that error saying it's been pulled and you got a problem on your site. Well, they went through their files. They couldn't really find it because they were just looking at the standard install files. But when I opened up the site and I have the web developer toolbar running, you see any AJAX calls that are getting made in the console logger, and saw a whole bunch of calls run into the .ru domain somewhere. And,
that's a sign right there.
So immediately you know that even though the page finished loading and everything looked fine, once I said yes, I still want to go to the site even though it's been down and hacked. It loads up fine, so you don't really know there's a problem. And so they didn't know there was a problem, and they don't know how long that went on until Google finally blocked them, and then they have to go through the whole process of getting themselves recertified, whatever, by Google to be approved for search engines. And it was actually through their HD access files that had all been hacked, and direct, AJAX calls or post server calls made directly from the HD access
I think
file.
that was the same hack that
So
was,
it's a common one that's going around here, I think, recently.
Yeah, it's going around. I had that. I got it into a WordPress site on our Joomla site.
Yeah, I think they got
So it's just helpful when you're looking at things to fix. You can monitor and see exactly what calls are getting made from your server with something like that web development.
Do they have a blog on their site?
I cannot remember.
Because he said WordPress, and my friend's company, who the client, it was through their blog that.
I think it was a straight
WordPress.
Yeah, I think this might have been a straight Joomla site. I don't think it had WordPress on it at all.
Yeah, that's on him right there, in the back. Here? Okay,
Well,
never mind. Right here.
One thing was that, when you do upgrade Joomla, you have that option, you could replace, just routinely replace your files, and that way, if there has been some unrecognized corruption,
Yes.
you'll be replacing them every 2 months automatically. So that's a
Good thing, yeah.
thing to do.
Right here.
It sounds like a lot of things you have to go manually and look around. Is there any way to have you find out some other way about some of these problems, like email or text or?
Yeah, I mean, there are tools, or there are tools that you can use to, schedule scans and stuff like that for your servers. We use a software a lot for a lot of our government sites that, get audited a lot. We use a tool called Secure Live that kind of does a little bit of what the Barracuda does there, intercepting requests and kind of looking at that first before it passes it on to Joomla. So, requests get looked at before they even touch Joomla. And it also has a lot of tools in there that allow you to...
That's at the application layer,
yes,
right?
yes.
It sits in the index file.
That allows you to, automate scans of all your files and get results of those so that you can see, maybe see files that have been changed, and you can review those and say, oh, why was this file changed? That doesn't look right, or it does malware scans as well, stuff like that. And so, that's one that we use a lot, that we use just about every other site. I'm sure there's other tools out there that do that can kind of automate that and help you, because again, I think automating that is just so much better, just because you get busy and we get busy and everybody gets busy, and that can fall by the wayside, but it needs to happen on a regular basis.
This is kind of related to your comment on the developer toolbar. There's also something in most browsers called HAR files, which is HTTP archive files, which keep a record of all the calls that your browser made to get every image on the page. Every single call is there, and you could kind of, and there are different tools where you can take your HAR file and just send it up, and they'll parse it different ways, and you can see if it's going to, Romania for a bunch of calls, you can pick that up that way as well.
And if I just was gonna go back to something about, we were talking about that application layer, having something sitting there. You know, the more we learn about the security, it's almost like the more scary it gets, the more you learn about it. You know, I was just reading something the other day where, you know, they're able to put like JavaScript and stuff like that and images.
Yeah.
So, you know, anybody that uploads a profile image to your site could be hacking your site. You know, and the profile image upload would do that, but then all they have to do is call up that image, and there they go, away they go. Something like that, sitting at that level, should, if it's worth anything, prevent stuff like that. You know, if you expect any interaction with your users, you kind of open yourself up to some things because you're expecting interaction, you're expecting your users to do stuff. So, you know, there's additional measures you can take to protect against that. You got to comment on that?
Yes, like the reason that by default, there's strong filtering on, and we do, like super bids are unfiltered, but you should be, like, avoid that temptation to just take filtering off
Yes.
for your users. And just really think about who you want to do what.
Right, and she's talking about, in Joomla, there's text filtering for any input that goes into the text area boxes or anything like that. And it strips out all kinds of formatting, but code that could be used at some point to attack your site, with the exception of super administrators. They have no filters. You can do whatever you want. And a lot of times people are like, well, I don't want to filter them. They can put whatever they want in there. Yes, I want them to be able to, you know, do all this stuff. But what you don't realize is removing those filters opens you up. You just asked for somebody to use your interactive features with your clients against you.
Do
you
not
know.
trust users. Anything
Yes.
from a user, you should consider no. Just
Yes.
consider it dangerous.
We got a question up front here.
Oh,
Yeah,
too.
to speed up performance, we've been using, instead of Apache, NGINX. Does anybody have any experience with NGINX and any issues over security?
Well, NGINX just is a web server, so if you want to use that rather than Apache, you can. The problems you're going to have is rendering the URLs proper because .htaccess is native to Apache, right? So I don't know if you've done if you're probably not doing pretty URLs, then you probably have.
Well, it works.
Are you? Did you turn it on?
Yeah.
Okay,
You've got the
you
index
must have
out.
installed something special to do it then. Oh, it's a Drupal site. Okay, so yeah, NGINX will work
We
with Drupal.
can't talk about that.
Yeah, with Joomla, it's not the same. Well, the same thing with Drupal's the same way. If Drupal's native to the .htaccess, I'm guessing, I imagine, so that they had that there. If you're not using that, and you're probably missing some of the pretty URL structure because that's what's rendering those links.
Well, we were looking for speed, and I'm curious.
Yeah, you're gonna get speed. Yeah, I mean, some people say it's faster. It matters which way you're processing PHP because mod.cgid or any of the mod.cgi anything is gonna it matters how you spawn the PHP process, are gonna be just as fast as how you would process an NGINX.
Right there, no.
Those scanning tools to see if there's any changes to the files, is that something you upload to Joomla? Or
So, I mean, it depends on what tool you're using. You would upload it in some way to your server, and then you would be access it usually through your browser or something like that, depending on where you've uploaded it to your server. The instance I was talking about, Secure Live, is an application that you upload to depending on how you're working it, either above or on the same level as your Joomla installation, and then it kind of interacts with the browser before Joomla interacts with the browser, and you know, kind of checks that first. But it also has kind of its own little dashboard with these tools available that can scan, you know, everywhere from Joomla, everywhere from its root down, and you know, send you a report via email or something like that.
Last question, Mike. We're time out.
I actually just had a comment to lead off of what John said. As far as tools, another good Joomla tool is OSC Security Suite, and I use that extensively. And they've got a virus scanner, they've got a file diff tool that if you know your site's clean, you can scan it. It will record the sizes of all those files, and then if you think a site's been hacked, you can rescan, and it will tell you directly which sites are a possible vulnerability or have been possibly compromised. And it does have some false positives, you know, but you can adjust that. And they've got their tool that's very similar to SecureLight, where it will email you
Yeah.
and block a lot of the,
Yeah.
most common exploits and
Right.
things like that. And it's a very, very good tool, and it's a set of Joomla components.
So when it comes down to it, you could do this.
This
You
is
could
what
do
you're
that.
supposed to do.
But,
Yeah, those are
they're-
patches to what real security is.
Right, but for the average site, for the average Joomla site out there, there are some things, a set of things, everything from your passwords to applications that can assist you in monitoring your site and stuff that you can do, just common sense, to make sure that to ensure that your site isn't prone to getting hacked. I don't think anybody can 100% guarantee that you will never get hacked. But we can eliminate a lot of the potential that some script kiddie out there or somebody that's just going along trying to find a Joomla site because they have this vulnerability they're trying to attack. We can prevent a lot of that just using some relatively simple common sense stuff on our sites.
Amen. All right, there you go.
We're going to
Thank you,
open
guys.
this up to a lightning round, so you gentlemen can stay there because there might be
About
more questions about security, about
About
anything.
anything.
Okay, so
Anything in
Joomla in
Joomla.
general.
So if you want to stay there and answer security questions,
Anything about
we're fine.
Joomla.
Gary, you
We'll
want to
start
run
right
this lightning round?
Okay.
You can just,
I was going to say, in general, if everybody could recommend one extension that's a must-have, what would you put on your site? Just like one answer from each person.
So my advice is do not use extensions. I'm being serious. If you can avoid using an extension, there's no reason to use an extension. I, in fact, encourage people to use the content management system to the awesomest they can do, whatever you can do. I install JCE and the extra tools, and I like to use things in the widget kit, or also any template club that has kind of a little set of tools. Try to stick with one set of things to keep it clean and neat.
I agree. One of the things I've tried to do in the last year is try to build all my sites and just stay as close to core as possible. When you try to do that, it's amazing how much you can actually do. But as far as if I had to have one extension, even with core, a Kiva backup has to be it, because you're going to need, either for yourself if you mess up and you need to roll back, or if your site gets hacked and you need to roll back, you need that. And the Kiva offers you the ability to send the backups off-site for a kind of an additional layer of disaster recovery or security there, stuff like that. That'd be kind of that is the first extension that goes into all my sites.
So there's three that I always install on all of my client sites, and that's JCE, the Kiva backup, and the JSecure, which adds that extra query string at the end of the admin login.
I'm going to probably be biased because I have extensions, so rather than say that, I would say just because there's an extension directory with almost 10,000 extensions, it doesn't mean your site needs to have 10,000 extensions on it.
Or 100.
Or 100, or even 50. You don't want to, I agree with Gary, you don't want to use an extension unless you just have to have some added functionality. And then you want to pick that extension for a specific reason and install it. The ones that have been mentioned here are all really fantastic.
Anybody else in the audience have anything you want to add to that? Like, oh my God, I have to have this to survive?
How many of you people have dev sites? Or do you just test everything on your live site?
It's a use case scenario. I mean, you can
Okay,
build in the
with
directory
that
site,
being
build
said,
in.
those that have dev sites, how many times do you wipe them clean?
Every time.
And they
Should.
store backup of their live site.
Yeah, that's how I do it.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of people that.
Okay,
I've
next
seen
question.
my-
next question.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, RS Form Pro. I think it's a great tool.
Oh.
I
Yeah,
use it all the
that's
time.
Parse Forms is a good forms tool. Next question?
Next question.
That was quick, lightning. Yeah.
I was struck once this time.
Oh, I know. I got one. For of the four people here, does anybody know any extensions that are on the JED that you really like? Or any extensions that are hard to
Right
find?
now, Chronoforms.
Okay.
But that's a long story.
Gary, come on.
JFB Connect's pretty cool. It's a lot of social stuff in there. Social's pretty popular.
I
so,
even news.
Yeah.
What is it?
I even news.
These are the ones that were on the JED at one time, yeah?
They were on the JED, but
Okay.
they had a URL problem.
Any other secret extension? Anybody in the room?
There's a handful of ones for connecting to other cloud services. For my business client, I had to do a Zendesk Joomla integration. They put a Zendesk tab on, but that came from Zendesk's website,
Right.
not from the JED. So if you're looking to integrate with somebody else, look on their site. Same thing for a Mumble server, with TeamSpeak or Ventrilo. You can get third-party extensions off the JED that do connect in and let you access that server and see what's on it.
Mike, I got a client who wants a chat application, pop-up window of chat.
Like a Gmail
What's that,
style
Mike?
chat, Facebook style chat?
Pardon?
Like Gmail or Facebook style chat?
Yeah, and there's an extension that I tested out for them actually a couple of years ago, and it was on the JED. JLive Chat was the name of it. Now it's off the JED.
I think it was
Pardon?
We've tested a lot of those for some community sites, and we found that the chat itself has to happen on third party.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to crash your site. It's going to drag it way down.
This one has, you install a client app on if you're going to be the person who's chatting with the customer, you got to install an app on your PC, and then the rest goes on the system. We didn't do much load testing with it, but anyway, that's one that I'm looking at that's not on the JD.
So, just for a personal plug, I guess, really quickly, we actually wrote one called banter.im. It just got put into the JED because it's just brand new. But basically, it's kind of like the one from 37 Signals. I don't know what it's called by 37 Signals. Campfire.
Yeah.
To give a lobby, a room, and then you can add participants, and it even has mobile interface and stuff
It's
like
like a
that.
chatter Yammer kind of thing.
So, yeah, it gets similar. Yeah.
Next question.
Next question.
Is any?
Right there. Take a row.
What's hot right now?
I'm pretty hot.
Okay, next question.
No, next answer. I mean, like hot. Sorry.
Like
I mean,
extension
in
wise?
Joomla, what's
Bootstrap.
the
Responsive design.
You're seeing a lot of major template clubs that start to adopt that, and if you're going to go look the last couple of months, they've started to come out with responsive templates even for 2.5.
Yeah,
It's going to start becoming standard, I think.
A lot of modules are being released now.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful one. I mean, everybody has pretty much like a beautiful one.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like a.
Does anyone here use Community Builder when you think about it?
Well, I mean, I wrote all their documentation, so I use it a lot.
That's a use case, remember, because mostly
It
I think
depends
it's
on what you need.
it's a profile system to the extremity.
It's a
right?
profile system, it's a listing system, it's a lot of the functionality, like people used to install Community Builder just to get a couple of extra fields on their reg form.
Yeah.
And you don't need to do that anymore. You don't need to do it to get administrative approval of users anymore.
Right.
But it's still like for like a mega application like that.
I use
it's
it more for
big stuff.
large systems,
sites.
for kind of
The
automated
lists.
member management.
Right.
You know, a lot of the developer tools, their triggers application, you know, when a user does this, have this reaction happen in their profile settings and stuff like that. It's very nice for that. I don't know
it's
about
like
communities, but I
it's like a
think
mini
it's-
Facebook.
well,
I mean,
well-
MySpace.
Well,
They're
that's
making it
that's
like
actually an interesting comment because it's old.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
legacy,
it is
it's legacy
old
field.
legacy.
It's kind of legacy too.
Very old.
I want to say another thing that I think is really hot, it's lynda.com. They have a lot of tutorials for Joomla and Drupal and WordPress, but and things like Git, now there's one for Git, so I think lynda.com is a terrific way to learn. For videos, it's $25 a month at
Next question.
$37.50.
Next question. Advertisements. Any more advertisements?
Next question.
Next question.
Good.
Okay, we have some giveaways. Here we go.
One question over here.
Okay, with 3.0 coming out now, if I'm working on a site that I know is going to go live in 6 to 8 months.
J3.
Yeah.
All the way.
For new development.
I would say if you have something you have to launch in 2 weeks, you're doing too far.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, in real world sites, like that are built by people who are Joomla professionals, you're not launching like instant. It's not like the site that a user is coming to Gary to Cloud Access and launching or using Fantastica to launch, and they're going to have their site. They're going to fool around with a little bit of the template and put up some content, and their site's gone. If you have a site that's going to take meaningful time to produce, J3 is the way to go if you're starting now. You know, you're not going to switch if you've been working on something for 6 months or 3 months. You're not going to switch over unless you're only using the core. And this is a great reason to use the core as much as you possibly can, because if you're
You don't have to
only
wait for
using the
anything
core,
else.
you don't have to wait. But you know, the only reason not to do J3 is, as I'm supposed to know, if you don't want not having any templates, extensions, or documentation, it's perfect. It's
I guess
absolutely
I do have
perfect.
one last question. Is there a way, maybe I just haven't get my brain wrapped around it because
You only have 2 minutes.
too many.
Wrap it up.
Is there any way to, in Joomla, to have, let's say, you're building a site where everything is based in like a particular country, and then you want to have a link where it brings up the same website with the same information for a different country?
You should have seen his multilingual topic.
No, not language, I mean, but let's say.
Content?
It's the content.
But you can actually do it with language. Exact same. You can use the multilingual feature to do that.
You can use
But
multilingual, but there's
different content.
geodetection.
Yeah, you would set different, you would set your links between your menu structure per language, or per whatever setting geographic that you're using. It doesn't have to be a different language.
Instead of having them
He might be
pick,
talking
they
just-
can pick a language, but it's not really going to change. If you still want to have it all in English, but they can still pick that flag, and nothing forces you to type the content in French, right? They can have the French flag.
We completely
And
get
there
that.
are the core does not do geodetection or anything like that. We do guessing, we do language guessing based on your browser settings. So that's why when you come into a multilingual site, or when you do an install, it guesses, like, if you're in the US, it guesses that you should use the ENUS language files. So, but we don't do sophisticated geodetection.
With the exception of the geodetection, automated geodetection though, you can use the multilingual features to create both versions of that site, even in the same language, but for different regions and different countries.
And we've been talking a lot about, for Joomla 4, about what multilingual should look like and how that kind of stuff should work. Because like, people were talking to me at Jay and Beyond about how, sometimes you really want, it's not parallel content, it's not the same content in different places. You actually want kind of the same topics, but different content in different places, and it doesn't necessarily, as long as you want English content in France.
Could I skin a site for a vendor that way? Like I have, 3 people that have the same catalog?
Here's the secret. Here is the little secret of Joomla. Multilingual is a multi-site implementation.
Yes.
It is multi-site. You just had to pretend the sites are different languages.
Oh, that's cool.
If you put it together correctly.
If you put it together, you follow.
You can do whatever you want with it as
Yeah,
far as this goes. It is really cool once
It's
you get into
one
it.
plugin.
Yeah, one plugin. Yeah.
Oh, really?
I think that's it.
That is secret out, please.
It's pretty intense.
Any other questions?
plugin?
Questions?
For
On any
language
level?
building. Language building.
On a basic level, on an advanced level, any questions?
I got a question. Why was hung on a forklift last night?
Oh, boy, that must have been after I left.
Why did you guys leave early? Everybody in the room, by the way, why did you guys leave early?
Okay, we have 4 giveaways. One of our sponsors here does a Joomla store locator, and he's giving away. Is he still here? He's giving away 2 of them. It's called the Joomla store locator, and it's for 2.5. And we also have 2 books by Angie Radke, Joomla templates. And
The latest books from Joomla Press.
Since we